Got away with it. Just. They were black. They were shiny. They were pointed. Sophie wanted them. Sophie was alone in the house. She entered her parents' bedroom, heading for the wardrobe. She inspected her mother's footwear. Bingo. She lifted the shoes out and placed them almost reverently on the mat by her parents' bed. Sitting on the bed, she eased her bare feet into the shoes. The shoes were half a size too big for her. Then she attempted to stand up in the shoes. She fell over back onto the bed. She stood up again and with very careful steps positioned herself in front of the full-length mirror and admired herself. She gingerly stepped across the room, steadying herself on furniture. She dared not wear the heels to the bus stop. She wore denims and trainers and carried her mother's shoes in a carrier bag. She rode the bus as far as the park, a mile from the town centre. On a bench in the park, Sophie took off her trainers. She looked around to make sure that no one was watching her. An old lady by the edge of the pond feeding the ducks didn't notice the girl who was sliding her left foot into her mother's shoe. A white Cairn terrier came up to her and sniffed in the right shoe. The dog snorted with disgust. The old lady whistled, and the dog bounded towards the pond. The creature let out a jealous bark that frightened the ducks, sending them up in the air with a clatter of wings. Sophie hastily put her trainers in the carrier bag. She looked around again and then carefully stood up. She took a few steps. The noise of the metal tips on the heels seemed to ring out across the park. She folded her trouser bottoms to cover her feet, leaving only the pointed toes and part of the heels exposed. She walked out of the park with tiny steps. She pictured her mother's confident striding in these same heels and aimed to follow that example. She seemed so self-assured for the next 300 yards that she almost forgot about her flashy footwear. Then disaster struck. One of the heels was caught in a crack in the pavement. A shoe detached itself and was sent skittering off towards the entrance of a large department store. Two middle-aged women were leaving the shop as Sophie desperately tried to retrieve the shoe and put it back on. One of the women noticed the shoe and tutted. "Silly little thing," she said. Suddenly, two boys whom Sophie knew from school were coming in the opposite direction. She thought Gordon and Colin were the nastiest boys in her class. Gordon and Colin thought Sophie was the soppiest, stupidest girl in the class. And because they thought she was the soppiest, stupidest girl in their class, they kicked the shoe into the middle of the high street. Cackling, they ran off. The shoe was now in the path of an oncoming car. Horrified, Sophie watched the front wheel of the car roll over the shoe. The heel crunched off. The car disappeared towards the end of the high street. Tearfully, she picked up the red shoe and made her way barefoot towards a bus that had pulled up by the bus stop. She felt she was being observed. She looked up and saw Mrs. Gramshaw, their blabbermouth neighbour, gazing down disapprovingly at the girl through the bus window. Mrs. Gramshaw must have seen everything and would surely tell Sophie's mother. Sophie would not be allowed to go out ever again for the rest of her life, or at least until she was married. She thought it best to get on the bus. Sophie considered her options. Might she throw the shoes away? No, her mother would notice their absence. Could she hide the broken shoes in her room and say nothing? No, her mother would surely find them on tidying up the girl's room. Could she confess? Definitely not. Her mother would fly into a rage and cut off her pocket money for the rest of her life, or at least until she was married. She felt she had forgotten something, but she couldn't remember what she'd forgotten. So she forgot about feeling that she had forgotten something. And then she noticed the shoe repair shop across the road. They could stick the heel back on. She felt a bound of excitement in her stomach, followed by a sinking heart. She only had 30 pence left in her pocket, which would not cover the cost of repair. Pocket money day would not be for another week. Even so, she could hide the shoes in her room and smuggle them to the repair shop next week. Besides, she didn't have enough for the bus fare, really. She would buy some sweets to cheer herself up a bit for the walk home. Half an hour later, as she was unwrapping a tiny chocolate bar, a juicy raindrop plopped on the back of her hand. Within minutes, the air smelt differently as the rain struck the warming paving stones. Her trouser bottoms were soon dark blue with dampness. She grizzled. She felt lonely and foolish. The loose heel rattled in the wrecked shoe. Then she remembered something. She'd left her trainers in the park. Eventually, she reached home and had a fantastic idea. She would repair the shoe herself. She had watched her grandfather hammer studs into his old army boots. She found a claw hammer in her father's toolbox and rested the shoe on the heel. She found it hard to hold the little nail in position, since the back area of the shoe was too small to accommodate her hand, holding a nail. Several times the nail fell out of the grip of her forefinger and thumb. Finally, the nail was in place, ready for the first hammer blow. The nail popped out. She screamed with frustration as she tossed the hammer and the shoe across the workbench. 20 minutes later, the first taps drove the first nail home, and a second, and a oops! The nail bent over 80 degrees. A third. Sophie smiled as she folded the insole back over the nails. The heel still wobbled like her milk tooth, but no sooner had she replaced the shoes in the wardrobe, the front door opened. There was a loud crackling of tall holdalls containing an evening dress and a patent leather handbag. "Get me a cup of tea, will you?" Sophie's mother said as she pushed the front door closed behind her with her foot. Sophie looked sheepishly down from the top of the stairs. Minutes later, she brought her mother tea on a tray with 2 digestive biscuits on a doily on a plate. Her mother had kicked off her shoes and was flexing her toes. Sophie went back up to her bedroom, took out her drawing book and coloured pencils. Soon, her mother ascended the stairs with a crackling carrier bags and went into her bedroom. Sophie heard a key in the front door. Her father stepped in. "Up here!" called out her mother. Heavier footfalls came up the stairs. Sophie was colouring a girl's dress in her drawing book. "Very nice," said her father. "Ha! You'd say that even if I was wearing a sack. Very nice as well. What about this to go with it? Very nice." The wardrobe door creaked open with a moan. Someone rummaged in the lower part of the wardrobe. "What's happened to this shoe?" Sophie froze. The red pencil stopped in mid-stroke. "Bit loose," her father commented. "Seen these nails?" "Can't wear those then." Someone rummaged in the wardrobe again. "Where's that other pair? Got another pair like those?" "Suppose these will have to do." "Very nice." Mystery about that shoe, though. Sophie unfroze, but the red pencil did not resume its work. She anticipated an interrogation. She would deny everything. She could imagine her mother's hard features searching her daughter's face and tones for the slightest hint of a lie. But the interrogation never came. Her parents left the bedroom and went upstairs, leaving a trail of pungent perfume behind them. Her mother clattered to the front door, opened it, and click-clapped to the car. Seconds later, the car engine noise faded to the end of the cul-de-sac. Could Sophie breathe a sigh of relief? However, she was prepared to stay on her toes for the next few days, but not with the help of her mother's now dodgy stilettos.